so I'll be continuing with the types of acquired immunity. Okay, so I will straightly go here. Okay, so if you still have doubt, I will see after the end of the class. Okay. So we have mostly like two types of acquired immunity. We have active acquired immunity and passive. Okay, so under active and passive, we have both natural active and artificial, and even we have natural passive and artificial passive immunity. Okay, so we'll see one by one. So what is active immunity? Okay, so active immunity, it is also called as the adaptive immunity. So it is the resistance which is developed by an individual as a result of infection of by any pathogenic organism or their toxic products. Okay, so mostly what happens here, again, we have two types. We have the natural active immunity and we have the artificial active immunity. So active immunity means what happens? Some infection we might get. So one simple example I'll give you is chicken pox. Okay, so chicken pox is one of an example. So what happened when we get chicken pox? When a person develops chicken pox, he doesn't develop the same chicken pox infection for the second time. So that is one form of an example of a active immunity. Okay, so it is the development of resistance against infections because of the uh, entry of the microorganism, and because of what? Because our body, like I've said already before, in the humoral immunity, like how our body, once we are infected with that specific microorganism, our body immediately it tries to remember that microorganism. So what happens? So we don't get infection for the second time. Okay, so again, if you see in the natural in the types of active immunity, we have the natural active immunity and we have the passive. So natural active immunity have what? When do we get it? It results from either a clinical or an inappropriate infection by a microbes. It can be any microorganism. Okay, and this natural active immunity is usually very strong. And for example, a person recovering from chickenpox and measles, they develop natural active immunity. That means once you get chickenpox, you will not get it in the second time. Measles. Okay, so this is one form and example of a natural active immunity. Okay, so immunity to the reinfection lasts only as long as the original infection remains active. That is, once the disease is cured, the patient becomes very susceptible to the particular microorganism again. So this is one simple example of natural active immunity. So this, when do we happen? When anything, if we are getting infected with that microorganism, then what happens? Our body comes, like that humoral immunity comes in action. That means our body fights again that infection. Then after that, it also memorizes it so that we don't get infection by the same microorganism. So the simple example is how when we have chicken pox, we don't develop it we don't develop any second infection of chicken pox. Okay, so that is an example of natural active immunity. Then artificial active immunity, I give example is vaccination. So do you know what is vaccination?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yes,
so
ma'am.
that's why what happened when we were small. Okay, our mothers, our parents used to take us to the hospital, right, for getting injection. So what happened? What is that vaccination actually? It is actually a live or kill microorganism. So what happened? We Why do we put live or kill microorganisms? What happens? So when that one enters inside our body, what will happen? Our body we will body immune system will what we will try to develop the antibodies, and after that it will try to fight against that infection. So that what happened, if that same microorganism, for example I'll give is polio. Okay, so polio is also what happened, we used to go for polio. Okay, and not, if not polio, also BCG. I think you must have heard of BCG. Okay, this is a main vaccine which we give to prevent tuberculosis. So why do we give this? So that because tuberculosis is a very dangerous infectious disease, okay, which kills millions of people. So because of that, it is also given in our as a part of our immunization. So what happened when we injected that BCG inside our body? Then our body will react. Then it will try to fight, it will develop antibodies, and it will try to memorize. So what happens if that same TB virus, if it tries to enters inside our body for the second time, our body immediately will try to remember, and because of that we will not develop tuberculosis. But actually that tuberculosis BCG vaccine, it is mostly valid for up to 9 years. Okay, so it does not mean that once you put that you will not get in the later life, but at least in the early stage of life it will protect us. So that is one example of artificial active immunity. Okay, so it can be in various form. It can be in case of bacterial vaccines, or it can be in case of viral vaccines. Okay, so are you all clear with this? Natural and active? Yes. If
Ma'am,
yes,
ma'am,
yes.
ma'am, I'm confused about ma'am live or adeno vaccine and kill vaccine, ma'am. मतलब
No, live means what?
मतलब
They don't directly injected any live microorganism. Okay, so sorry, live means they are going to inject the live microorganism. Killed means they are going to inject the killed microorganism. That means not the live one. So even if it enters inside, actually, even if it, so that this, especially a persons with a very low immunity status, like a persons who are having TB or a person with AIDS, we should never inject any live vaccine to them. Okay, so we give this. So these are actually the various simple. I'll tell you this live or kill. It is a various preparations of all these vaccines. How it is given. Okay, some are given as live or kill, and some are given as antigens. So I have already given. Na live vaccine is like your BCG. Okay, then kill is like your cholera vaccine. So all this, and toxoids means it is like your tetanus toxoids. Okay, so if you want in details, okay, so you can understand. Live means live, kill means like kill only.
yes,
No,
ma'am.
no,
Sub unit,
no.
ma'am.
Yes.
Sub unit.
Huh?
Sub unit, ma'am. Live kill and sub unit announcement. Sub
No,
unit मतलब
subunits
क्या
is
है
like for
vaccine?
hepatitis also we have different types, not hepatitis B, C. So it is just one unit of that hepatitis infection. Okay, it is one subunit of hepatitis. Clear? You know now hepatitis we have different types A, B, C, D, E. Okay, so hepatitis B, it is
Yes, ma'am.
one subunit of that hepatitis in vaccination. Okay, so in you just
Okay.
need to remember simple natural immunity. There is we don't inject anything, but what happens when any how do you develop immunity when any antigen enters inside our body? Okay, like for the example of
Ma'am,
chickenpox. Yes.
you ma'am, you said natural active immunity is a the strong immunity. Ma'am, why this is called a strong immunity? Natural active
Because
immunity.
once we develop the
Why?
immunity, na, like for example, chickenpox. Do you remember? Have you got chickenpox when you are small?
No,
No,
no, ma'am, no.
no. That means okay. So what happened? I'll give an example. Me, not only me, anyone. Okay, that's what we used to say. Chickenpox. Once you get it once, you never get it twice. Okay, so that is a simple example of this. Why we don't get it twice? Because in the first time when we get it, our body functions, our immune systems produce the antibodies, then recognize that, and after that, what happens if the second time, if the same chickenpox virus enters inside our body immediately will recognize it because of that memory cells. I told you now about memory B cells. Okay, so because
Yes,
of
ma'am.
that, we
Ma'am,
don't get the second infection. That is called as the natural
ma'am,
active immunity. Okay.
ma'am, ma'am, this memory B cell, memory T cell, मतलब
Memory
वो
B cells, what
lifetime
did they do?
lifetime memorize करता है क्या? मतलब I think
Yeah, they memorize. It's like
if
they
I have
remember. Okay, they remember that.
lifetime,
Okay, this antigen have already entered our body before. So this is, I will. So if now if it enters again, it will recognize it immediately, and it will try to kill it. Okay.
no, this
And
is lifelong,
last, yeah,
lifetime.
yeah, yes.
Okay, ma'am.
Are you
Okay,
clear?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, so actually, immunity is actually a very vast topic, if you say actually. So there are many things you might be a little bit confusing, but okay. So in this active immunity, remember, we have the natural active immunity and we have the artificial. Artificial from the word itself. That means we don't, our body immediately does not produce antibodies, but in order to produce antibodies, what we are doing, we are introducing the agent antigen. Okay, so once we introduce antigen, our body will develop the that one resistance towards that infection if it happens, if the same virus enters in the second time. Okay, so that is called your artificial active immunity.
मैम
Then if you
मैम
come to
जस्ट
the
लाइक
passive,
प्लाज्मा डोनेट ना मैम,
huh?
जस्ट लाइक प्लाज्मा डोनेट अभी मतलब जो कोरोना वायरस रिकवरी होता है ना वो प्लाज्मा डोनेट कर रहा है ना,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
दैट्स
yeah,
इज अ
yeah, yeah,
एग्जांपल.
yeah. That is yeah, that is also one example. Okay.
ओके ओके मैम.
Actually, that plasma one, if I'll say, okay, that is not exactly not active immunity. That is one. That is an example of passive. Okay, that is mostly it is under passive because what happened in that plasma therapy? Already the antibodies are there. Yes or no against the coronavirus? Yes. So when
Yes
we
ma'am, yes
inject
ma'am.
that plasma therapy, we are not injecting the that virus, but we are injecting the antibodies against that virus. So that is actually a form of artificial passive immunity. Okay, I'll be discussing now. Okay, clear? Like remember in
Yes,
active immunity,
yes
we are
ma'am.
injecting the antigen. And because of the injection of the antigen, our body will produce the antibodies. Okay, but in passive immunity, we are suppose that we are going to inject the antibodies, not the antigen. Okay.
Okay ma'am.
Okay, so what is passive immunity? It is the resistance which is transmitted to a recipient in a ready-made form. So we don't, and because if you inject antibodies, that is like a ready-made form, yes or no? That antibodies it might be produced in some other animals. Sometimes what happen also, in order to get this artificial passive immunity, what do? They inject some antigens to some animals. Okay, and that animals will produce that antibodies against that infection. And after that, what happened with that antibodies which is produced in that animal? They're going to take it and they're going to inject it into the human being. So by injecting that, our body will get that antibodies and we will be able to recover from that infection. Okay, so that is what simple in this one of example of
मैम
your artificial passive immunity. You clear ना?
मैम आई यस मैम वो आपने बोला कि पैसिव इम्यूनिटी में हम लोग क्या करते हैं एंटीबॉडी देते हैं ना,
Yeah,
इंजेक्ट करते हैं
antibodies.
एंटीबॉडी,
Yeah.
okay ma'am,
Okay.
but when active immunity, when we keep the antigen, then our body react and
Yeah. And
produce
produce the
immunoglobulin
antibodies.
and
So that
memorize
is called as your
that
active.
ma'am.
Okay. Active means our
Yes
body
ma'am,
is
but
doing
in
something. But passive means it's
yes
like
ma'am.
directly you're giving ready-made thing. Okay. Suppose an example of active immunity is like, suppose if you want to cook Maggie, you cook at home, you'll prepare everything. That is like active. Actively you're preparing and eating. But for example, if you're buying Maggie online, if you're ordering, so that is like ready-made thing, right? So, okay, it's a simple example
Ma'am,
that is like that. Passive means directly you're going to get it in the
ma'am,
ready-made form. You don't need to do anything. Okay. Okay, so we
okay
have
ma'am,
two
but
types.
ma'am passive immunity, yes
Yes.
ma'am. Ma'am, in passive immunity, when you give antibody from outside, then ma'am,
Yeah. Our
when our
bodies,
body produce immunoglobulin, then our body know
okay, we are going to
how
use
many
hemoglobin.
how many
Which,
antibody and मतलब कितना चाहिए.
though that though it depends, it's not like
लेकिन मैम उसमें
exactly to I cannot, huh?
पैसिव में मतलब पैसिव
Passive
इम्यूनिटी में
means
मैम
it
मतलब
will
वो
be
इम्यूनोग्लोबुलिन
injected
मतलब
in the ready-made
कितना.
form. Okay, so wait, I'll be explaining later. Okay. Actually, I'll show you after this. You can ask again. Okay, so we have two types. We have the natural immunity. So what happened? This is example of how a mother, okay, suppose during breastfeeding or even when we are inside a mother's womb, what happened? There is some transmission of this one antibodies from the mother to the child. That's why what happened, if you know, that's why we always say that breastfeeding, it's a very important for the this one for the young babies, because what happened when a mother is breastfeeding along with the milk, so many antibodies are provided to the baby, because like I've said, a babies when they are still very small, they have a very low immune status. Okay, so the immune status is not matlab, it is not fully developed. So because of that, when we breastfeed a baby, then the baby will be able to get the antibodies from where? That from her mother. And even inside the mother's womb, okay, the placenta, okay? So even in the placenta also, there is transfer of immunity. So that type of immunity, we call it as a natural passive immunity, which occurs naturally. We don't do anything. We don't inject or we don't do anything. That is called as the natural passive immunity. Okay, then if you see the second one, we have the artificial passive immunity. So this is the examples like what you have said about plasma therapy. Okay, so what happened here? So there is an administration of the antibodies. Okay, so it can be in the, it can be any sera of animal, or it can be any there's one pool human gamma globulin, like you have mentioned about the plasma therapy. So that one comes into function here in this artificial passive immunity. Do you have question? Yes,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
clear now?
Ma'am, yes, ma'am. Hyperimmune sera and convergent sera means sera means what, ma'am? Hyperimmune and convergent sera means,
Serum,
ma'am.
it can be in any form. It can be in the blood
That means
form. It can be, okay, it can be in any other body liquid form. Okay, serum. Okay, we have blood serum, we have another, so many types of serum. Okay, so mostly if you see in the plasma therapy, how do they, you by using the plasma serum? Yes, they will be, that means from our blood. Okay, they will be separating the plasma, then only the plasma they will be giving to the, this one, to the individual who are having this coronavirus, okay, infected with coronavirus. So you just remember that we have in passive immunity, we have natural passive immunity, in which it occurs naturally, which is mostly transmitted from the mother to the child. So what is transmitted? Antibodies is transmitted. And even here in artificial passive, we are injecting the antibodies. Okay, clear? Yes, you still having
Ma'am,
doubts?
natural passive immunity. Yes, ma'am. In natural passive immunity, ma'am, what kind of antibody transmitted from mother to child, ma'am? मतलब,
Okay, most,
all kind of disease is protect from this antibody or not, ma'am? मतलब, all this type, मतलब, so many disease,
yeah,
na,
it
ma'am.
is
So,
protecting. We have, especially during the placenta, na, one type of antibodies is transmitted, IgG. Okay, this is one form of antibodies. So this is mostly transmitted during the transplacental. But through the milk and the colostrum during breastfeeding, so different types of antibodies are transmitted. Okay, clear? So you just remember from the milk, okay, breastfeeding. First, it starts from the
yes, ma'am.
placenta inside the mother's womb. So IgG, that is the main only antibodies actually which can cross the placenta and which can be transmitted to the baby. And after that, during the breastfeeding, so many other different types of antibodies are transmitted, not only that one. Okay. And if you come, artificial means artificially we are introducing something extra. Just remember that word. Passively means passively it occurs naturally. Okay, natural, natural passive. When we talk artificial passive, that means these are something.
Ma'am,
Yes, yes. Are you still having
artificial
doubt?
active immunity means, ma'am.
Active immunity means our body actively it is
Yes,
functioning or it is trying to
artificial
fight.
active, ma'am.
Yeah. Then if you say passive means passive, like I've said, like it, we don't do anything much, because the word passive means what? Staying, right? Like not moving. Active means what? It is, we are actively functioning. Passive means what? We are not doing much. We are just staying at the same point, or we are not moving much. So in passive immunity, what happened? We are directly introducing the antibodies. So our body does not need to do much work. You understand? Already it's been done by somebody else. You understand? Right? That is the meaning of passive immunity. But active means our body it is doing all the functions. Because what happened when an antigen enters, we are fighting against it, we are going to recognize it. So that is a form of active immunity. But passive immunity, what happened? We already are introduced with the antibodies. That means it is like a ready-made form. Because antibodies, why it is produced? When there is any infections. Like I have given the example, like we have given the example of plasma therapy. That is one form of artificial passive immunity, which in which we are directly introducing the antibodies. Okay, so are you clear?
Ma'am, one confusion, ma'am. Artificial active immunity and artificial passive immunity, ma'am, उसमें difference क्या है? Artificial
Why so?
active and
Artificial
artificial
active, we have
passive.
no, what we are giving. We are giving the antigen. We are not giving the antibodies. Okay. So in artificial passive, we are directly introducing the antibodies. So what happened when we introduce antigens? Our body first it will recognize the antigen, then it will try to produce the antibodies. After that, it will try to memorize it. Yes. And after so that when the next antigen, if the same antigen enters inside our body, we will recognize it immediately and our body will fight it. But here in artificial passive, what happened? We are introducing the antibodies. Already somebody else is already preparing these antibodies. Like I have given the example. Suppose if you want to give antibodies of TB to any individual, passive immunity. Firstly, you will introduce the BCG vaccines to a, suppose to an animal. Then that animal will produce the antibodies after recognizing and all those. So that antibodies which is produced by that animals, we are going to take it, and with that antibodies we are going to inject it to an individual. So once we inject that antibodies to an individual, then that individual will have that antibodies, and immediately with that antibodies it will fight against the tuberculosis. So that is a very simple example I can say of artificial passive immunity. Okay, are you clear?
मैम I have one doubt मैम BCG vaccine मैम after birth हम लोग को देते हैं ना after birth
Yeah,
मैम
yeah, that is
BCG vaccine
actually
हमें बोला
BCG
उसमें
vaccine.
live
It is given
live
for tuberculosis. Okay,
मैं उस
live
मैम वो
vaccine. That
live
is
है ना
yeah,
एटेन्यूएट
live vaccine.
मैम मैम आपने मैम आपने बोला था कि जो मतलब जो पेशेंट मतलब एफोर्ड कर सकता है एंटीबॉडी बना सकता है उसको हम लोग लाइव देते हैं जो इम्यूनिटी पावर लो है उसको हम लोग जो मतलब किल
Yeah,
देते हैं
what
ना मैम
happens
तो
because
मतलब
if
आफ्टर
you give,
बर्थ
listen, if you
मैम
give live
वो
vaccine to a
बेबी
person
बेबी
who is already very, if the immune system is very low, if they are already very immunocompromised, so it will only make the patient more worse. Instead of making the patient heal, he will be becoming more worse because his body won't be able to fight, or his body won't be able to fight or to develop the antibodies much. Okay. That's why we should not give any live vaccine to a person with AIDS or a person with tuberculosis or any persons who are having like cancer patient. They are already having very less immune status. Because what happened when we
मैम
introduce any
मतलब मेरा
vaccine?
कि मैम
Huh? Yes?
मैम जो बेबी मैम अंडर मतलब लो बर्थ वेट बर्थ मतलब लो बर्थ वेट
Yeah,
डिलीवर
yeah,
हुआ है
yeah,
उसका
yeah,
मतलब
yeah.
उसका इम्यून सिस्टम बहुत वीक है वो
Yeah,
मतलब
yeah,
लो
yeah.
बर्थ वेट उस
Okay,
बेबी को
that's
हम
why what
लोग
happened?
आफ्टर बर्थ बीसीजी वैक्सीन देंगे कि नहीं बीसीजी देंगे कि नहीं उस बेबी को बीसीजी वैक्सीन
No, actually, that one to be given, but actually, but that one is very different from a person with cancer. Cancer is totally different, and this patient with AIDS is totally different. Okay. But still, if the but what happened for those baby who are that they will be breastfeeding, right? Those are even if they are lower weight, so they'll be getting the antibodies from their mother. Okay, even though they might be low
ओके
birth weight. Okay, so you have any more question? Hello.
नो मैम
Okay, so just remember in immunity we have two type. We have the natural immunity and the acquired immunity. Okay, so the natural immunity, these are those immunity which a person develop naturally through our genes. And in that we have specific and non-specific. And in the artificial, we have acquired, we have the natural, active, and the passive. And the active, we have the active immunity, natural active immunity, and we have the artificial which develops by which we get through vaccination injection of antigen. Then passive immunity, also this is mostly the injection of, it is the recipient of any ready-made form, mostly we is the antibodies comes into function here. Okay, so we have the natural passive and we have the artificial passive. Okay, so natural passive, it is mostly from transfer from the mother, and the artificial, it is artificially we are introducing the antibodies. Okay, so hope everyone is clear. Okay. Okay, class.
यस
Okay, so
यस
if
मैम
any more
यस
doubt, please you can ask me in the next class, or you can even this one. Okay, ask in the group. Okay, so thank you
ओके मैम
everyone. Have a nice day.
थैंक यू मैम हैव अ
Mm.
नाइस डे